everyone. Welcome to the Migration Summit 2023. I'm really happy to have you here again. We're halfway through week 3, and wow, what a time we've had so far. My name is Lorraine Charles. I'm the Executive Director of NAMO. The Migration Summit 2023, organized by MIT React NAMO Quran Foundation, is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, social enterprises, policymakers, employers, and governments around key challenges and opportunities for refugees and migrant communities. This year, we're exploring the theme, co-creating pathways for learning, livelihood, and dignity. I'm really happy today to introduce Kawa, a guest we've had before, and he's going to host an amazing session talking about hiring refugees. So over to you, Kawa, and really welcome.
Thanks so much, Lorraine, and welcome everyone to the session and to the summit if it's your first event. So as Lorraine mentioned, my name's Carver. I head up the team at Somos, a all-in-one digital toolkit to empower language teachers to earn and live well. And in today's session, we're going to be exploring the impact of living in limbo on a refugee's ability to work, the challenges remote work can bring, and ways to overcome these challenges through collaboration between NGOs, refugees, and employers. We have an incredible lineup of panelists, including Elise Aya Chen, project lead at the NGO Open Door Policy, and Arij Khan and Ali Ahmed Ahmadi, both of whom are refugees who have successfully entered the remote workforce, are both graduates of the Open Door Policy Remote Employability Scheme, and are team members with me at Somos. So in this session, we'll be looking to raise awareness of the unique employment challenges faced by refugees living in limbo, offer some pathways for refugees seeking work by connecting them with supportive communities, NGOs like ODP, and potential employers. And finally, we'll be looking to discuss the best practices in refugee hiring and support in the workplace. So you would have seen in the chat as we dive into this important conversation, we encourage you to introduce yourselves, share where you're joining from, and tell us a little bit about what brought you to this discussion today. If you've got any questions for the panelists, we'd love to hear them, so please drop them into the chat and we'll jump into those at the end of the session. So before we get going, just wanted to give a brief introduction of our panelists and what brings them here. So starting with Elise. Elise is a human rights advocate who has spent over half a decade working with refugees through various non-profit organisations and initiatives, including building the professional capacities of refugee leaders and community workers, supporting education for refugee children, and developing community programmes on health, women issues, community programmes, and refugee-led advocacy efforts. Currently, she leads employability training programs at Open Door Policy, which trains and connects refugees in Southeast Asia to remote work opportunities. Alongside her day-to-day role at ODP, Elise supports 3 refugee-led organisations in Malaysia with their organisational development on a part-time basis. Next, we also have Arij. Arij is originally from Pakistan and has been living in Malaysia as a refugee since 2013. Having graduated from Open Door's remote employability program, Arij joined Somos as an associate in September 2022. Being part of a startup has been a fast learning curve for her. In year 1, she's already worked on management accounts and our research and development claims. Alongside her day-to-day role, she's studying online for an accounting and finance degree. Arij is a fierce advocate for refugee rights and will be speaking to her experience of living as a refugee in Malaysia, including the systemic challenges and barriers to fundamental rights created by living in limbo, her resettlement process, and of course her plans for the future. And last but definitely not least, we have Ali. Ali was born in Afghanistan, and his family fled to Iran due to war and persecution when he was only 4 months old. He also joined Somos in September 2022, where he is an associate working on content creation. Since joining the team, he's played a critical part in generating brand awareness and engaging with our early adopters. He's also a graduate of the Open Door Policy Remote Employability Programme, And before that, he completed his GED, while building up significant volunteering experience. Outside of work, he creates content for his Instagram page and volunteers at a refugee learning centre in Jakarta. Ali is passionate about supporting young, talented and hardworking refugees in Indonesia, many of whom lack access to education, work and basic human rights. So hope you'll all join me in welcoming them and really looking forward to hearing from all of you. So before we move forward, I just thought it'd be useful to set some background and frame some context. And Elise, if you wouldn't mind helping me with this one. So I thought it'd be useful, taking into account your advocacy background and your day-to-day professional experience, if you could just help us create a bit of an overview of the key terms we're going to be looking at today in the legal and practical sense. So think specifically refugee, asylum seeker, migrant, and of course, living in limbo.
Sure, Kawa. So I think let's start with definition of a migrant versus what an asylum seeker and a refugee typically is. So a migrant usually would leave their home country of origin due to economic reasons, versus an asylum seeker or a refugee might leave particularly because they're trying to escape war, persecution, or extreme discrimination. Then when we talk about the difference between an asylum seeker and refugee, it really depends on where are they at in terms of the process of their refugee status. So an asylum seeker would have applied for refugee status, but are still pending that approval for that process, depending either it's governed by UNHCR or the government that they're in a host country for. So a refugee would have completed this process and would have been legally recognized as a refugee either by UNHCR or the government. When we talk about living in limbo, generally we refer to refugees or asylum seekers who are in a host country waiting for resettlement. When we talk about in limbo, we're also usually looking at refugees who may not have some of their most fundamental basic human rights recognized by the government and the local population, especially when it comes to the right to work and the right to education.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I think in terms of just setting that overview for us, understanding, practically what it means in terms of living in limbo. Opening that up just a bit wider to the rest of the panel. Areej, I'll start with you. You've lived this definition. So I just thought it'd be good to maybe if you could share a little bit of background about yourself, where you are now, where you've come from, and I guess what that phrase living in limbo has meant to you personally.
Okay, hi everyone. So as you already know my name, I live in Malaysia with my family and we migrated to Malaysia in 2013, almost 10 years ago. So we started living here as refugees. So this is the situation my family and I have faced for the past 10 years. We arrived with the belief that the resettlement process would take around 1 to 2 years, but that was not the case. So as refugees, we have faced many difficulties such as lack of rights to employment, higher education, healthcare, and many more. So at the age of 12, I faced challenges like being alone without any relatives or friends, and speaking a foreign language was a barrier. Receiving limited education, like normal Malaysian schools, they wouldn't accept refugees. So for the school which was for refugees was until grade 7 only. And also worrying about getting arrested by immigration if you are going out or traveling somewhere, because we didn't have the card at that time. And also watching my parents struggle to find work. These 10 years of uncertainty have affected our mental and emotional health a lot, as we have not been able to build a permanent home because we always thought that we would be moving soon. So we didn't buy the items like which are for basic needs. And we also had no hope and we couldn't return to our native country because our lives were in danger. Since this is also a Muslim country, we still face some kind of discrimination here as well. Even if we have reported to UNHCR as well, but they suggest us to shift our houses, which is also not easy because we have to put down big deposits, and the owners and the agents, they don't really refund us back the money because they already know we are refugees, so we cannot go and report against them. So like living in limbo feels like being trapped in a prison where you can only watch others living normally, but you're not allowed to participate. Also, it feels like being in a room with little or no oxygen. It is like slowly drinking poison as it becomes harder and harder with each passing day because there is no hope. Yes, that was it.
Thank you for sharing, Areej. It's a lot in there and really powerful. And I think talking about restrictions, I think in every aspect of life. From you mentioned schooling, I think work from your parents' perspective, and obviously for you as you get older, and then even items like dealing with landlords and how you physically live. Ali, I just wanted to kind of bring you into the conversation as well in terms of we've heard a little bit there about kind of the legal framework, obviously just the practical there. Like, what does that phrase mean to you? Living in limbo. How's that played out for you?
Hello everyone, Ramazan Karim to whoever fast. Living in limbo, well, basically I grown up as a Muslim, and in Islam we have this phrase living at limbo, which means that it's a place that when you die, you go there, and it's a temporary place, and you have limbo heaven and limbo hell, and we wait till the judgment day. So for me, being a refugee in Indonesia since 2016, I feel like Indonesia being a limbo for me, but it's not a pleasant one because I'm in the stage of uncertainty about my future, my circumstances. I do have lack of access to many things like bank account, opening a bank account, having a SIM card, or trying to find a job. Limbo sounds unpleasant to me, being a refugee, as a refugee in Indonesia.
Thank you for sharing, Ali. And I think some consistent themes there. I think across first, I think the definition, but also both of your experiences in terms of that kind of entrapment feeling in terms of what can happen next. Elise, I just wanted to bring you back into the conversation on this topic, because obviously there we've got very powerful examples of what this can mean for a human being in terms of those restrictions. Are you able to speak to a little bit about the background behind ODP, its mission? How does that fit alongside this context, and how does ODP as an organization go about working with refugees like Ali and Areej, and working with them in this limbo status?
Thanks, Kawar. So I think, as Ali and Areej illustrated, living in limbo is really difficult. You can't really move forward, and so many things are out of reach for you. And I think the most pressing thing, of course, is just not being able to cover your daily expenses, your daily needs, and that can really create a multitude of issues. So when ODP was founded, it was really trying to target the issue that a lot of refugees and asylum seekers are unable to have livelihood to be able to cover these basic needs, and then, of course, resulting in so many other issues that they have to face. So with that, it's really our mission to then train and connect refugees in limbo to remote work opportunities that are sustainable and full-time in the shortest time possible. And so we do this through a few different programs that we run. Currently, we have 3 programs. We have 2, which are employability programs. And so after running through the whole training, if our graduates manage to successfully complete the entire training and are deemed employable, we then connect them to remote opportunities with our employment partners. We do 2 kinds of employability programs, one which is our own flagship program, and we do this by connecting them to employment partners such as Somos, who are companies that we vet and we then bring on to partner with us to post out jobs for our graduates to apply for. The other employment program that we have is a partnership with Microsoft with their Nurturing Communities group, and basically it is for IT support engineer roles that they would then be connected to job opportunities with a Microsoft delivery partner that supports this ecosystem. We also have a third program, which is an English Accelerator program. We recognize that some refugees may not have the adequate English proficiency level that we need at a C1 level or above. And so anyone with a B2 level can join our English program for 6 weeks, build that professional English skills, and then be eligible to enroll into either of our employability programs.
Awesome. Thanks, Elise. And I think, like, obviously there's a wide range of programs there. And I'm going to come back to you in a minute about, the outreach work you do to connect with the refugee community. But I think before doing that, it'd be great to hear from Ali and Arij on their kind of interaction. So I'll start with you again, Arij. Obviously, you've just set the context for us of some of the challenges and also some of the behaviours of external people, like you mentioned, the landlords. How do you assess programs when you out them and you're living in limbo? And what kind of concerns maybe come up, before you kind of decide something's worth kind of interacting with?
Can you please repeat your question? It was stuck in between.
Sure, no problem. I was just saying that you mentioned in your previous answer that there were some parts of life when you're living in limbo where you're not necessarily dealing with someone you trust. So maybe like the landlord that you mentioned, who can just change the rent because they know of your status. How do you interact when you hear about a program like ODP? What kind of goes through your mind when you hear about those things, and how do you kind of size it up?
Okay, so it was actually a program where it was online. I didn't have to go anywhere. It was free of cost. So I wanted to tell you that there was one more program before this, which I did, and it was also about getting us a job. But it was about getting us a job in another country so that we can be settled, and then we can call our parents. But that was not fake, but they didn't fulfill their promise. So because of some reason, because it was connected to my school where we were teaching at that time. So they thought that if we give them this chance, all of the teachers who are refugees would then be resettled somewhere. So they won't have the teachers there. So they have to then hire teachers who are not refugees. So then they have to pay more. So they thought about that and then they stopped the process. So when I heard about ODP process, I think about the same thing, like maybe it might be fake. But one of my acquaintance who told me about this program, he actually guides about education. So I called him about my education process, but he told me that if I tried this would be a great opportunity for me to support my family as well as to keep studying. So then I tried to apply for this because I wanted to help my family as well and my educational expenses. I think this is a great opportunity for refugees. Like, for example, I'm sitting in front of all of you, and we are now much more financially stable than before. So there is less stress in terms of finance in the house now. So yeah, so this gives me peace, and I'm helping my parents somehow.
That's awesome, and I think it's obviously we've got a couple of things there. One I think is some of the dangers and concerns around some of these potentially exploitative programs, and also the kind of nature of work that maybe comes through some of those, and then what can kind of come in a more kind of positive collaboration through someone like ODP. Ali, I just wanted to give you a chance to maybe talk about your experience. How did you discover ODP, and what made you decide to go for it?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's an interesting story because I first encountered about ODP in 2019 while I was working as a data entry for an NGO. But in that time, I didn't take it serious and I wasn't sure if this program works or not. But later on, after I heard from my friend Zakir, he is also in Indonesia and he graduated and also working for a company through ODP. Then I tried to give it a try and I applied it. I was accepted and I graduated a couple of months later after I finished my trainings. And I then got an interview with Somos and get into the company. So it was an interesting story and journey because I learned a lot through ODP, and I believe that it would be great for also other refugees to apply and try their chance with ODP, not only just to find a job, but also to learn and grow, because ODP lessons, I believe, they are very, very useful in the life.
Oh, thank you, Ali, for sharing. And I think, again, like there's that powerful thing, like you said, of course, there's a search for work, but allowing to kind of have that education piece to sit alongside it. Elise, yeah, I just wanted to come back, having heard those experiences. Obviously, when you're dealing with communities that potentially have this power imbalance with some of the organizations they work with, can you tell us a little bit about how that kind of pre-work on your side works? How do you do your outreach? Do you have any of these challenges where maybe people are concerned about what the program is? What kind of challenges face you as a provider on the recruitment side?
Sure. So when we started off with the organization in 2020, that was before I joined, and the first team had just outreach with NGOs working in the space. So we started our pilot in Malaysia. So it's UNHCR and other organizations that were working to serve the refugee population. And when I joined, because I do have a network of community leaders and community-based organizations, so that was where I spread the word. And I think, of course, us being very close to those leaders from our other capacities helped to build their confidence, so that they weren't really concerned about whether there would be a result. But otherwise, we do document a lot of the updates on our Instagram and our LinkedIn, so placement posts as well on which graduates went into which companies and for what roles. So they're also available there to show. We tag them whenever they consent to being publicized, so that anyone who's interested can also see, okay, these are real individuals with real Instagram pages and they're not bots. But aside from that, I think after cohort 3, because we started having a lot more individuals that were graduating and being placed in roles, so now we had a very strong alumni network that could spread the word themselves and kind of vet through, like this is exactly what you'll be experiencing, and this is what kind of challenges or obstacles that you might face along the way. And so I think that helps to build the confidence of anyone who applied with this. In terms of challenges, though, I would say that sometimes we do come across a lot of refugees who might just feel like this is just another opportunity. Let me just give it a shot, not realizing that this is a very serious program. It can be quite rigorous, especially as we always try to improve the cohort to make sure the end result has true impact for the individuals as well as the companies that they get placed in. So sometimes you do come across refugees who might just try their best, not just try their luck, but not really commit to it. And that means that we might lose some of these spots to actual motivated refugees. I think the other issue that we're looking at right now, when we look at our mission, we want to place refugees into employment as fast as possible. And so sometimes we do realize that a lot of the refugees, especially from the alumni networks that we have, may come from a lower tier. So they might not be employable itself already. They need to develop a few more years of having that kind of context to be able to have all these soft skills that's relevant. So that is, kind of against the mission that we have and trying to get in place. At the same time, we might have that small percentage of refugees who come already with a lot of employment opportunities. But then us having to place them through the same program of 8 weeks of building that soft skills might be quite difficult and a long process for some of them. So really the challenge here today has evolved into how do we get and recruit the employable ones so that we can quickly get them into jobs, versus how do we support those who are still at a lower tier. I think what we're trying to explore right now is tapping onto our partners to refer them over to programs that can focus on the lower level of training or role-specific training, whereas they'll come to us more for kind of the coaching, the final interview prep and resume prep, and any kind of like polishing on the soft skills that they might need to ace those job applications.
No, I understand. Okay, thanks, Elise, for sharing. I think giving that additional kind of context. I wanted to, so the kind of programs you're describing obviously center around remote work. And so I just wanted to take a few minutes, I think, to speak to everyone really about remote work a little bit in a broader sense. Reid, you touched on, I think in your previous answer, around some of the experiences teaching. I think it'd be useful to hear, what aside from remote work, were your opportunities sort of prior to, connecting with ODP? What kind of job roles are available to, a young person living in limbo in Malaysia where you've been, and what kind of challenges are presented by those roles?
Okay, so we actually have some opportunities to work at factories and college and refugee schools. They do hire refugees, but they pay less salary. So the package for salary is less, and the work they took is more than 12 hours most of the time. So I have taught as a teacher in a refugee school, and the challenges were the workload was too much. Like, for example, they used to have two shifts, afternoon and morning, and they hire only one teacher for both shifts, and they pay the salary which is even less than the basic salary here for the teacher. So we have a lot of, like, the teachers has to do cleaning and arranging and other tasks that they provide us. They can also call us on weekends to attend something and to do things. And if we don't want to do that, and if we want to take a day off, it's like they will cut the salary for 3 days straight. So this was the limitations and challenges we faced in Malaysia. Not even in that school, but even if we go anywhere, because they know that we are refugees, we cannot report to the police, so they don't pay full salary. Yeah, so there was like different when I was working remotely and I graduated with ODP. I'm getting the salary which is more and not it is helpful rather than working there for 12 hours and more, and then still did not get that.
Oh, no, thank you, Arij. And again, that theme of that kind of power imbalance when someone knows that, you've got no one really to turn to, it's come up again. Ali, you and I have had a number of discussions around, I think, some of your previous roles and some of the challenges. Are you able to share, again, some of the experiences you've had, I guess, in Indonesia, but in that kind of non-remote context?
All right, sure. So one of the most significant challenges in Indonesia for refugees is finding job and formal employment, because Indonesia is not a signatory to the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees. So in that case, they do not have rational legal framework for refugees to protect them. And finding a job in Indonesia, based on my own experience, I work with different organizations. I volunteer with different organizations and learning centers. But the challenges are the payment. You can earn bare minimum wage in Indonesia, or sometimes just the transportation and lunch meal. So working would be the same as Indonesian employment, but the different part is the payment and the treatment that you receive. So I saw many young talented refugees in Indonesia that they are capable of doing a lot of things, and I can say some of them are expert in their field. But because we are in limbo and we are not allowed to work, it makes it difficult for us to grow and achieve our goals.
Thank you, Ali and Arij, for sharing. Elise, I just wanted to kind of talk about that in a slightly wider sense as well. So, I think we're hearing again, like, consistently around this power dynamic issue, and obviously just that lack of legal rights, but also, I think remote work obviously still represents a pretty small amount of the kind of work people living in limbo do. Are you able to speak a little bit to that kind of wider context of employment options available, maybe in Malaysia or Southeast Asia, some of the other areas where you've got expertise, and what kind of challenges that creates in a broader sense for people?
Sure. As Arj mentioned, also a lot of opportunities in Malaysia, maybe more low-skilled work opportunities, such as in restaurants, in factories, in plantations. And oftentimes, if they do find a way to get this employment, they are all illegal, and employers know that, and therefore that can lead to a lot of labor exploitation. Like he mentioned, a lot of refugees are being overworked. They're not allowed any rest days, or if they do, then it's with a pay cut. Otherwise, there's a lot of wage theft as well. So even with the organization that I was with, where we did case management for labor disputes, oftentimes it'd be very, very difficult to get an employer to pay those wages because they know that the law is on their side. Aside from that, I think also it comes with a lot of workplace health hazards that employers don't care to look after. So lack PPEs and just any sort of compensation is non-existent for any refugee workers. Of course, there is also that overarching issue of arrest and detention, especially in a place like Malaysia, where immigration officials know exactly where mass hiring of refugees take place. And so it becomes very dangerous. With countries like Indonesia, like Ali said, I think it's almost virtually impossible to find local employment with local workplaces. So a lot of them would have to resort to volunteering for refugee organizations or NGOs. I think with refugee organizations, as he highlighted, it's a very low amount of stipend that they can receive, and that doesn't cover nearly enough of what they really need for a month. So we do see a lot of refugees in both of these countries kind of putting off healthcare treatments, especially when they're life-saving. I think also there is an issue when it comes to NGOs employing refugees. I see that we often employ them as translators or, really small community workers, and we tend to pay them very little. We understand that, they might not come with the same experience, whether in years of studies or years of employment, but I think it's also up to us to really, show what kind of inclusivity do we want to see in refugee employment by also putting them into positions where they can build themselves professionally. I think in another country that we also serve, like in Thailand, it also kind of depends on the nationality you come from, your skin color, and what sort of employment that you might have opportunities in. For example, those from Myanmar tend to not be allowed to have any form of employment, and they have to stay in refugee camps where there's virtually no opportunity for them. And if they do leave, they will get arrested and be sent back. So it really varies depending on nationality. Overall, I think if countries like in Malaysia or in Thailand, if they do manage to find employment in a local workplace, often it's dangerous, it's dirty, and demeaning as well. I think the other thing is also to look at the bigger picture. If a lot of refugees have to go towards low labor work, low skilled work, they aren't able to develop that professional expertise. And so when you do manage to get resettled, they have to resort to these sort of work. And so to escape the cycle of poverty, it's going to be even harder when you're in a country that's developed and you're now competing with individuals who have been trained to build a higher skill set than you.
No, thank you for sharing that, Liz. I think just getting that wider context in the region. So just spinning back around to kind of remote work. So obviously, and I speak to this personally in terms of with Ali and Arij, it's been a neat solution for us, I think particularly for an early stage startup. But just putting the kind of in limbo aspect to one side for a minute and just thinking about this, as team members, maybe Ali, you could go first. I mean, how's remote work generally? Obviously, it's a post-pandemic, especially. It's a real discussion in workplaces all over the world about whether we're going back to the office, hybrid, or remote only. We're obviously remote only and kind of have to be given, all the various situations involved. Can you speak to your just views on it generally, just remote work and, in an ideal world, what would you change about it? And, how can we kind of structure the workplace to work best for you?
Yeah, sure. Remote work was very new for me since the pandemic hit, and I started working as a data entry in late 2019 for an NGO. And it was very new, and it was a new experience and new challenge, of course, comes along with it. But after I learned for a couple of months and I passed 1 year working with them, I learned a lot about how to work remotely and gain more significant experience of working remotely. But working with somos also same results, and I could have applied those experiences working with somos. So what I like about working remotely is one of the things is offers me the flexibility to work anywhere at any time, and also work remotely allows me to create a personalized and comfortable workspace which is I can increase productivity and motivation. Also, as I mentioned, since I'm not allowed to, as a minor refugee, I'm not allowed to work in Indonesia, it helps me to avoid that. So that's one of the biggest thing here. So also one thing is due to long hours of sitting and working with computer, I think I would probably take I would improve my break time to take some time to stretch my muscles, because in long run, I believe it kind of affect me.
No, thank you. And I'm glad you've touched on well-being, and I'm going to come back to you on that shortly as well. Arij, you and Ali have got, you're obviously both in two different countries, but you've got slightly two different setups in that, you're with your family in Malaysia. How's that worked out for you in terms of remote work? Like, how does remote work fit in with how you're living and kind of being able to connect with your sort of family day to day?
Yeah, to be honest, I like this job because I live in an area where the transportation is an issue. There is no government transportation. So traveling through cab or Uber daily would be very expensive for anyone. So if we want to live here, like, we should have our own conveyance somehow, but we are not allowed to get license as well. So I like this system, which is where, like, I can help my mother as well sometimes when it's urgent. And when I'm just tired by sitting, so I just take a short break and relax. And like, even my parents are relaxed now because they don't have to worry that I'm not at home, and they will not have any fear that I might get caught by the immigration if they come there where I'm working. So in that case, they are very relieved, and also it is helpful for me because I'm getting the experience at home, which I can get in the office. So it had like, if in an ideal world, I think like I like working remotely because it helps me to do most of the things like looking after my parents and also having meals with them. And if they need help, that I'm at least at home because they are old. So, but sometimes it could be tiring, like I distractive also. For example, if some guest arrives because I live with my family, so I have to serve some refreshments, so I have to come out of the room. So, but I appreciate it a lot because I'm actually getting that office experience while just sitting at home. So I think in ideal world, I would just set up one separate room for like office and work there professionally and not sitting in my bedroom and doing work. Yeah, that's it.
No, I understand, and definitely having more space would really help. Ali, just wanted to come back to you on the kind of well-being piece. So, one aspect, one challenge, I can speak to as a team is, we're all in different places. We can't just catch up on a Friday and have dinner. There needs to be obviously a community aspect outside of work, I think, and it's kind of more necessary when you have remote-only businesses. Like, what's helped you, create community outside of work, acknowledging obviously that limbo has made that difficult generally while you've been in Indonesia, and I think especially as a young person.
Yeah, sure. Well, for me, as being a single refugee in Indonesia and being far from my family, working remotely has its challenges. So one of the greatest challenges is isolation. So basically, you will be at home and working remotely, and you probably don't have interaction with outside world for a couple of hours during the day. And as you mentioned, so we cannot have Friday nights hangouts and having a dinner together since we are in different countries. But to overcome these challenges, so one of the things that somos provide us is the mentorship that we have, so that it helps me to fill that gap. Plus, to build a community, I think it would be great for refugees to connect with NGOs and learning centers to do some volunteer works, such as I do, because I thought the necessity to do that since I've been in isolation for a long time, and I thought it's gonna help me to improve and enhance my mental health. and get in touch with the other refugees and communities and give them back what I've learned. And in any case, I can help them. So it would be great to do those kind of volunteering jobs and get in touch with those communities to improve them and also improve your mental health and well-being while helping them.
Oh, thank you. Elise, I just wanted to take some of those topics Alice, touched on around, well, clearly isolation, but remote work comes with its own unique challenges, and I think especially when you've got individuals. So here we've got a young person basically by themselves. In terms of your kind of wider experience dealing with maybe employment partners or other NGOs, what kind of challenges do you think refugees and employers kind of need to be live to, I think, before they go into these jobs? So, what kind of preparation, say, can an employer do to make sure that they've created the best possible environment for their team coming in remotely?
I mean, definitely just in a general sense, remote working can be pretty tough, not just for a refugee, but for anyone who might not be used to digital work. I think also it kind of requires a lot of skill to be developed, and we also need to be mindful that all the refugees that ODP gets into our program may have not had any work experience at all. For example, Ali and RH, who have been in their host countries for so many years, a lot of them may arrive in their host country as teenagers. And so again, they lack that experience that older adults may have, coming with a lot of years of experience. But then again, also older refugees may have more experience working in traditional workplaces where you can actually land on, someone physical next to you to help you out. So I think that distance can also make it hard. Sometimes power dynamics might also make refugees feel like, I don't want to ask too much. I don't want to bother someone too much. And so, again, not being physically next to your supervisor, your managers may also kind of create more of a wedge to be able to help them build those skills to be successful and efficient remote workers. I think the other thing also, we see a lot of remote workers not having the ability to have proper work-life balance. Some people tend to overwork. You stay on your computer, you check your emails anytime. And so I think it's about having to build that discipline, but also knowing when to stop. Like Ali said, just having to stop and take a break and stretch. I also tend to forget that when you're so deep into the work. And I think we need to be cognizant that some refugees may also feel like I need to prove something, right? Like this is a huge deal for me to maintain this livelihood. So they might put a little bit more than what they need to. So I think employers need to be mindful of that, to also kind of enforce, you need to have your breaks, you need to have your time off, you need to make sure that you take the most out of the benefits that we give you so that you can have an all-rounded life when it comes to, not just remote work and remote work only. Another thing that we do notice when it comes to employing refugee workers is that lack of bank accounts. As Ali also mentioned, in all the countries that we serve, refugees cannot register for bank accounts under their name. I won't say that it's 100% impossible. It is possible, but with a lot of difficulty. Sometimes it also means you declaring that you are employed on a black and white to the banks, and that's not always going to be secure for all refugees to be able to get. So I think that being a huge barrier, especially for companies that have very strict auditing processes that really need those salary payments to be made directly to the worker in the contract itself. Apart from that, there might be some refugees who are able to find friends or families who might be able to loan bank accounts. And with families, it might be more possible, but with friends, you can never really know if that is a relationship you can trust. So far, we have seen, most refugees being resourceful and being able to find that. But again, when it comes to employers who really need that auditing process to be more straightforward, they might lose out on opportunities. I think another thing that I'm also growingly wanting to be more concerned about as we're working on our programs is looking at, how refugees may be able to learn to build themselves, looking at the amount of stress that they endure, not just because of past traumas, but also existing traumas. Even as they have employment currently, they might have a lot of debt. They might have a lot of healthcare treatments that they've been putting off. And so a lot of things that they have to feed their finances into. And so the stress of poverty can really affect a person's ability, to actually seek the same type of well-being opportunities that we might know how to regulate against, or even to be able to build those skills or make proper decisions. So I think employers need to be very cognizant on this and really provide those additional support. So we need to build equitable spaces. We cannot put everyone on the exact equal playing ground and expect everyone to cope the same way. We need to recognize that some individuals may need a little bit more support and be okay with that. I think another thing is also then looking at lack of opportunities for some refugees to build some of these experiences. And so I think a lot of employers need to look at potential rather than existing skill set. And I know it can be difficult for some companies when they have certain quotas and profit margins to reach. But I think it's also about companies all playing their little part of trying to address this huge humanitarian issue of so many displaced persons all around the world without opportunities for employment and livelihood.
No, thank you. And I think that sets the scene nicely to just talk about how we all kind of work together to create, more supportive ecosystem. So I think just sort of taking my moderator hat off for a second, just to kind of explain, I think maybe to everyone, how we all connect. So as I mentioned, Ali and Arij are part of the team at Somos. We're super early stage and did a specific fundraising round last year with the intention of working with ODP to bring in refugee team members. So that's just kind of the context we have there, and obviously we were in discussions, had our interview process, and then been building the relationship since. Are you able to talk us through what your typical journey is of building a relationship with a potential employer, and then how that kind of flows, I guess, all the way to post-hiring? And what are you looking for in an ideal? You touched on some of the things just then, but what are you looking for in an ideal employment partner?
So I think to start off, of course, they need to be companies that are offering full-time remote work opportunities that are at an entry level, most likely, because a lot of our graduates are at that level. And then, of course, beyond that, it's about where that location of their office, the hiring office is. We generally do not form partnerships with companies in the countries where our refugee graduates are living in, just to make sure that we don't get anyone in trouble. So the laws around, being contractors, being freelancers for a company outside of the country you're living is a lot more gray. And so you don't need a work permit to be able to work for those companies. So it's making sure they fit all those basic requirements. But after that, of course, then we need to make sure that they are aligned with our impact hiring mission. So we don't want to get into partnerships with anyone who wants to exploit refugees, who are saying things like, oh, we pay people so little in Philippines and therefore we can pay your refugees a bit less. So I think that's really what we look out for, especially at that second stage, when we finally jump onto a call to brief them about all these things, right? Like the payments, our talent pool, and all the other kind of challenges that might come, and to see if there's any concerns on the employer side. After everyone's agreed and say, yes, they're all into impact hiring, they have the roles available, and they are all ready to prioritize our graduates in their hiring pool, they look at potential rather than experience, then we start to establish those processes between our companies. So looking at, feedback loops. So every time our graduates go for an interview, we want to make sure that, everyone has that feedback to grow. So if someone's failed their interview, we get those feedback and pass it on to our graduates and their mentors so they can work on it to have a more successful interview the next time around. Aside from that, then it's also kind of the whole hiring process updates. We want to make sure that there is no space for exploitation in that process as well. So we make sure that employer partners keep us in the loop along the entire process up until the job offer. At that stage, if the graduate, and we do make sure that the graduates are also briefed that, this is the minimum salary you should be having, these are the kind of rights that you have, and these are the, kind of set up on what you can expect. If everything's okay, then both the employment partner and the graduate takes it on indirectly by themselves. However, that doesn't end there in terms of ODP's involvement. We do want to make sure that both sides are set up for success. So we don't intervene in between the two of them, but we do regular check-ins. So our employment team will check in with employment partners at least 3 times across 6 months. And on my side, from the programs, we'll check in with the graduates across 6 times for the 6 months to make sure that everyone's doing okay. There's no concerns. There's nothing we need to jump on and provide any additional support on. After that 6 months, we'll still be there for our graduates in case they need anything, but we pretty much stop the formal check-ins at that point, hoping that, everyone's kind of independent and ready to just kind of go ahead on their own.
No, thank you. And I think that, it just gives a really helpful insight into, that employer side and I think what they need to be doing. Ali, Arij, obviously, when you went through this process at ODP and obviously you've been doing your regular check-ins with them, you're keen to get a job and, you both talked about finances and getting money in, but obviously, I can speak to being part of your team and the fact that you both put a huge emphasis on learning and it's kind of gone like that in a really short space of time. maybe Arid, you can start. Now that you've got a bit of experience under your belt, alongside that pay, what's kind of central to you from a professional development perspective that you're trying to look to get from your kind of work relationship?
Okay, so from a professional development perspective, what matters most for me is like to continuously keep learning and growing and to be able to apply new skills and knowledge in a meaningful way. And this can be achieved through training and development opportunities, which somos definitely provides us with, so as well as by being challenged with new and interesting projects and tasks which we do differently. So it helps me to develop professionally.
No, awesome, thank you. And Ali, from your perspective, you've mastered a lot of technology tools, for example, in a very short space of time since you've joined as well. And you touched on earlier about working with other refugees. How would you like to kind of take the experience you've had and bring it into the process of helping others either with their initial employment or like professional development moving forward?
Yeah, sure. I'm working with the Learning Center in Jakarta, and one of their programs that they have is to help the GED graduates, which is general education development, to find a job and the process and to build the LinkedIn and what's the interview question. So I've been through this process with Open Door Policy. I get significant experience from the Open Door Policy, of course. And for my ideal perspective to helping refugees as a volunteer would be to share those knowledge with them, to have those training sessions. And also I'm helping refugees, some of my friends here, to encourage them to apply to Open Door Policy or any organization or NGOs same as Open Door Policy, to learn also and to showcase their talent, because I believe they have those talents to improve, but they just need that motivation and that push to try that.
Thank you. I can obviously definitely speak to how much emphasis Ali and Arid have put on learning, and I think the support they've had from ODP to kind of do that as well. Coming back to you, Elise, in terms of how we kind of take that to the next level. So, one thing we talk about a lot at Somos is co-ownership, and, Ali and Arid will be involved in that just like any other team member would be. How do you ensure in the sector you work in that refugees have got a strong voice in the organisations that they're working with, be that, a program like yours, education, or, employment thereafter?
Yeah, so I think especially for organizations like ourselves working for refugees, we also need to work alongside them. And I've seen, sometimes as much as we try, it can come sometimes as in form of tokenism. So we just have a refugee and say that we've involved someone, but not really involve them in the decision-making process and the design of our programs. So I think that's really important for all of us working with the community to be mindful of. With Open Door Policy, we're also, as we're evolving ourselves in an organization, we're trying to include more refugees into our staff or into our volunteer pool so that they can really work hand in hand with us. Ideally, of course, it would be really great if one day ODP can be managed and led by refugees themselves, because I think they'll know best on how to, evolve the program, really support the community. So we might be at the very infant stage of all of that, building all the strong foundations that's necessary. And hopefully one day we might have our own graduates, being a core part of the ODP team itself. I do hope that, overall, even as they go into companies, whether in the profit world, the nonprofit world, that again, it's all about building those equitable platforms for them to contribute. So you cannot expect to create a really equal playing field and put a refugee and a non-refugee together and expect them to both contribute the same. We have to understand the power dynamics that some refugees might face and, a lot of unlearning that they have to build, especially if, they spend a huge proportion of their lives being refugees. If they, they didn't spend 20 years being non-refugees and then, realizing that they could, or rather having built that self-esteem before, having to hold on to that refugee status. For a lot of young children who grow up as refugees, they might be a little bit more hesitant to speak up. So I think us being very cognizant of all of that will help us to build those equitable spaces and really propel them forward. So no tokenism, no saying like, we'll just have you in the room, but really asking them, being very proactive and asking what are their thoughts along the way.
No, thank you. And I think it's really interesting to hear that perspective, and I think it's something that's come up in the summit a few times in terms of kind of centering those voices and in a decision-making way as well. I'm just conscious we're getting towards the end time-wise, so I just wanted to finish, in terms of question perspective, just on, I guess, everyone's future plans, really. So at least maybe you could go first in terms of what's next for ODP.
Sure. I mean, to be honest, we're looking at a very challenging situation. We have AI taking out a lot of these entry-level jobs that we've been looking at. We're also seeing such a huge change in the tech industry, and that's where a lot of our employment partners come from, with all the huge layoffs that can also affect the entry-level roles that are available. I think just in general, the whole changing perception towards remote work. It was really big during the pandemic, and now we see a lot of people employing more of a hybrid style. And so that wouldn't work for our talents. So we have to be more creative and tap onto new industries while we continue to advocate for existing companies to go back into the remote work to hire our refugee talents. I think overall it's really us advocating, that when you employ refugees, you have high retention rates. You have, especially if you're in industries that rely on a lot of creativity, refugees can bring a lot of different insights from the non-refugee staff population. So there's a lot of appeal to hiring refugees into your workforce. But in terms of ODP itself, aside from us, making sure that we have those strong foundations to keep our programs going, we are excited because we're looking at merging with a larger nonprofit organizations so that we can scale our programs further, not only to reach out to a larger range of different refugees, but also to different kind of tiers. As I've spoken about some challenges that we have, that, we focus on employability and putting them as fast as possible. We're also looking at how do we serve those at the lower tier, and, with the new organization that we'll hopefully be merging with, that, we'll be able to provide them a much, progressive transition and pathway along up unto employability.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I guess just to finish, Ali and Arij, so maybe Arij, you'd like to go first. I was very lucky in that obviously we hired both of you entry level, and we spent a bit of time figuring out what your interests are, and Arij, you've grown more towards kind of finance, and Ali's been more kind of on the content side. So it's been easy to kind of shape work around your interests that also fits the business need. But yeah, Arij, maybe first you can go first. What are your ambitions to finish off, really, either at Somos or just more broadly, and what kind of skills you're looking to develop?
So at Somos, I hope that Somos starts to grow soon. So that I would like to play in part, as I might finish my studies at that time, and maybe in between of that. So I'm really looking forward to continue with accounts. And professionally, I want to start a business in the future, but I haven't decided which one yet. So I have few in mind. And I have few dreams, like to open an orphanage for kids who don't have parents, and also an old home together. And another dream is to open a tiffin center or a small cafe where I would love to give jobs to those women who want to be independent but are unable to because of their education. So, and I have many more, but these were the main ones.
I think it's okay to have a lot. Sounds awesome. Thank you, and for your contributions. And then Ali, over to you. So obviously, like I said, you've been spending a lot of time on content and a number of other things. But how about you? What are you excited for next?
Sure. Well, personally, I hope to one day reunite with my family again and see them. And with Somos, I actually as part of being Somos, I aspire to witness the company grow and expand. Being part of this journey would be one of my highest highlights of my life, and I'm looking forward to share it with my future children. And professionally, I hope to one day, as Ari mentioned, start my own business and apply all the experience that I gained from Somos and grow and expand my own business. I haven't decided what would be, since the world changed every day and new things comes and goes. So I need to learn and gain more experience as much as I can till that time comes.
Oh, well, thank you, and thank all three of you for your contributions. I saw there's one question I thought we could pick up on from Lorraine around payments. So I can speak to that from the employment perspective. It's challenging because both Arij and Ali are in countries where they can't open bank accounts. So we have, I guess, a two-step approach to it. For their regular salary, they have friends and family who open an account for them, and we pay into that. And we have a invoicing process so that basically everyone knows at whatever stage where the money is and kind of how it's moving. The second side of it is around expenses. So we use Wise, and we've created expense budgets essentially, so that the team have something that they can use to buy things online. So, for example, the team have an education or personal development budget every month that they can go and expend, X amount online, which would otherwise be difficult. We've also, after 1 year of being at Somos, the team qualified for our co-ownership scheme, and that relates to virtual shares because we wouldn't be able to connect them up on a traditional share scheme, and that essentially gives them a contractual right to a cash payment. So we can use the same mechanism to make sure that they are benefiting as any other early stage employee, sort of technology startup would. Sorry, I interrupted you there. Did you have a follow-up?
No. I was just going to say thank you for that answer. Continue, if you.
Cool. Were there any other questions for any of the panel? I think we might be okay there. All right. Well, cool. Well, look, thank you everyone for joining. I put in the details of the organisations that took part into the chat if you want to find out a bit more about Somos at ODP. I'll also just add now as well the agenda for the rest of Migration Summit. There's some amazing sessions still to come. I think we've got still a week and a half left, right? Or a bit longer? Yeah. So I don't know whether, Lorraine, there are any particular sessions you wanted to highlight, but we'll agenda into the chat as well.
Yes, actually, the session happening in half an hour. Katrina, who's the founder of ODP, will be speaking. So it'll be really an interesting session, ODP Upwardly Global. So really good, I'll be there. So good session if you're interested in sort of this theme. So thank you all for being here. Thank you so much, all of you. This is a fantastic, fascinating discussion. And it just shows that this is possible. It just takes will. It's possible. So thank you. And I hope you all are as inspired as I am. Have a really lovely day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.